I've always said that I like learning, I just didn't like school. Actually, I love learning, and I just didn't like school. What do I mean by that? What I mean is I never liked sitting in a classroom. I never liked sitting in a auditorium with a bunch of other vultures trying to get their degrees that are going to be out in the real world one day competing against me. I really never ever saw the point in that. We're all learning the same exact thing. We're all learning from the same exact textbooks. We're all learning from the same exact instructor. And I'm like, if we're all doing the same thing, how am I supposed to get ahead of these guys? Because most of the guys in my classes that I've had from like kindergarten up through college were always smarter than me. So I'm like, I'm never gonna succeed being in this classroom with all these other vultures, although I always liked learning, right? And that was another thing was with textbooks is a lot of the material was always outdated. So I didn't feel comfortable learning from textbooks that were created in the 1960s. You know, they weren't gonna do anything for me in the 90s, 2000s, and beyond, right? The one thing that I've always told the students is like, hey, if you really, really wanna rise above the pack in life and you want to succeed in anything, you have to separate yourself from the tribe. You're gonna have to go your own way, so to speak, right? You can't follow the beaten path. You can't go in the same direction that everybody else is going, all of your peers, and then expect a different result or expect to achieve crazy success, especially ahead of them if they're smarter than you. It's just not gonna happen. If you want to become successful in life, you have to go off the beaten path. You have to discover your own path. And that begins with discovering who you are as an individual. What makes you tick? What makes you unique? What are your special talents? What are you naturally good at that you could easily go out there into the real world and profit from and build an income from and, you know, maybe even build a business out of? Like what I've done with my pickup and self-development business, now it's kind of extended into other branches with like business coaching and acquiring other websites that have nothing to do with pickup and dating and stuff like that. I was able to achieve success in life and I rose to become one of the 1%. Now it's crazy to even say that. I'm like, it's weird when I say that, right? To become part of the 1%. The way I did that was I did the opposite of what everybody else was doing. I got off the beaten path because it wasn't working for me. Whenever I was on the beaten path, I wasn't accomplishing shit in life. I was very, very average. I was working at Macy's selling women's shoes. Yeah, that's right. I sold women's shoes in Macy's Union Square for a while. Selling women's shoes. After that, I was working for an electronics store. I was selling cars 1 or 2 summers. I was very, very average, right? I was barely scraping by. This all was a result of following the beaten path. I wasn't moving ahead in life. I was just average. I mean, below average, arguably. I wasn't doing anything great. I didn't feel excited about life anymore. And I was like, I just turned 21. And I remember being like, man, this sucks. I was 21 years old. And I'm like, I never want to feel this shit again. And I'm like, I got to figure out why I'm feeling like this, what I can do to fix it, and how to change it, right? And I had to look back on what I was doing wrong. Like I tell you guys, always trust your gut. And I was like, every time I like thought about, the times I had a queasy feeling in my gut, it was the times that I was following the beaten path. Like when I was in school, especially college, I've told this story a number of times when I was like registering for classes, this is before the internet, and there was this line going around my college like a mile long. I had to be in that line at 5 a.m. because my dad woke me up and he's like, oh, you have to register for your classes. And I'm like, oh God, this is college? And it was like 5 a.m. and I was in that line for 4 or 5 hours registering for classes with all these other dudes, all these other students who were pursuing the same type of degrees that I was. And I'm like, how am I supposed to succeed like this, right? And it wasn't until I got off of that beaten path. Fortunately, I met an entrepreneur. I mentioned this, his name's Chris. He was married to my sister for a little while. And Chris kind of took me under his wing for a bit. And I mean, you know, it's not like I spent 24/7 with him, but he showed me enough about business versus school because he was a dropout and he was, you know, he wasn't ashamed of that. He was like, yeah, I dropped out of school. I'm like, okay, why'd you do that? And he was like, because I was starting my own business and I started in college. Because of him, I was like a probably like a sophomore in college, and I was already starting my own businesses, and I was trying to get off that beaten path, because he was like, hey, you have the same intelligence I do, which isn't much, right? He was like, you know, we have the same intelligence level. In order for us to get ahead in this world, we're gonna have to fend for ourselves. And he's like, you have to do things your own way. He didn't say get off the beaten path, but he was like, you have to do what feels right in your gut. That was the first time I heard something like that. He was like, what you're feeling in your gut is probably right. And he's like, if it feels right to do something else, that's what you need to do. And it was really from that point on, even though I stayed in school to please my parents, my heart was never in it anymore. My grades were good enough to pass, but I mean, most of the time I was in this, like spending time in the student union, playing billiards, video games, or writing in my notebook like a business idea. I mean, I started building businesses around that time. School was just kind of took a back seat, but I found it more, like 1,000 times more enjoyable to read books on business at the local bookstore. Back then there was no Barnes & Nobles. We had something called B. Dalton Bookseller. So I would go to B. Dalton Bookseller in the mall, and I would take out like books on how to build your own business with just $500 or just $1,000, stuff like that, which was crazy back then. There was no internet yet. I mean, now you could do that, right? But I was reading books like that, and I enjoyed reading those books. I remember being excited to go to the bookstore 1,000 times more than I was excited to go to class at college. The only thing that I was actually excited about as far as going to school was there were hot girls walking around campus. That's the only thing that really motivated me to go to class. Otherwise I would never have gone. But like I said, I've always liked learning. I just didn't like school. And you might be the same way, right? I mean, if you like learning about whatever topic it is, whether it's business, self-development, psychology, you name it, rather than sitting in a classroom where it's like formalized and they're just basically teaching you textbook theory, then you might need to make some changes. Otherwise you're going to waste 4 or 5 years in college, a few $100,000 of your parents' money graduating, and you're going to come out with this degree that you're never going to use, which pretty much accounts for like 90% of the population out there with actual degrees. I studied business in college, and I'm still running my own businesses today, but I can tell you I have not used a single thing that I've ever learned in college once in any of my businesses. Those tactics and techniques are so pathetically outdated and unuseful. It's sad, right? It's insane that they charged money for that. I was even more insane to sit in those classrooms to get that, to try to get that degree. For what? I never needed it. I did fine without it. As I've always said, if you want to become a doctor, a lawyer, engineer, something like that, you have to be licensed by the state, and yes, you have to go to school for that. There's no way around that, unfortunately. But everything else, you could go to vocational school, you can learn a trade, a skill, you can learn off of YouTube. I mean, it's insane the amount of places, the amount of tools that we have today to learn from. I've said a number of times, you want to learn from mentors and not teachers. As a matter of fact, I even did a coaching video that was like literally entitled, "Fire your teachers, hire mentors instead." If I had a kid today, I would not be shopping colleges for him. I would not be putting away money for college. I would assume he'd want to learn business like me or something else, but I would just find him mentors, and I would just surpass school. I mean, maybe high school, yeah, just because for development purposes, I think it's good to go like engage with social activities in high school and play sports and go to your prom and stuff like that. So I want him to go to high school, but as for like college, I don't deem it necessary. It's absolutely not necessary, especially these days. It's gonna be like 4 or 5 years wasted from his youth, like some of the best years of his life, from like 18 to 23. I'd rather have him spend that time dating, building a business, learning, self-educating himself, reading books that he wants to read, and not books that were, like pushed onto him by his guidance counselor, anything like that. I want him to choose what he wants to read. And especially these days with colleges, man, they're like altering history. They're altering a lot of these textbooks just to push their like socially correct agenda, collectivizing everybody, and especially these young minds. So yeah, I definitely would not want my kid at one of these brain warping institutions, otherwise known as university or college. I'd rather have him get on his own path, learn on his own, self-educate. I mean, really the key is self-educate. That's the best type of learning you're ever gonna have in life, son, is self-education. Learning from actually doing it, right? Learning from actually getting out there. And this is why I am not a fan of people who don't live what they teach. It's like, dude, if you're gonna write a book on how to do this, this, and this, hey, you better be doing this, this, and this, right? Don't write a book on that stuff if you're just a writer and you've never done it, or you're not actively doing it anymore. You shouldn't be doing that. I'm like a strong advocate against that. I think I mentioned this once, but I plugged a book on my channel once called, it was about Stoicism and being stoic. And this writer, this author, he's like a New York Times best-selling author. He writes books on Stoicism. And he has a blog on Stoicism, and he's constantly posting these verses from the Stoics, and like, this is how you live stoically, and and let go of your ego, and ego is not your friend, and let go of it. I used to follow the guy on Instagram, I don't anymore. I checked his Instagram, he was posting all this social justice warrior shit, and not only that, it's like, that's fine, that's your belief, but he was posting that stuff, and then some fans had, like a lot of fans actually, disagreed, right? That weren't SJWs, they disagreed with him, and he, just like a typical SJW, he started attacking them, a lot of personal attacks, ad hominem attacks, a lot of ego protection, just a lot of childish insults, a lot of name calling. I mean, just stuff you would do in like middle school. I literally lost respect for the guy, like this. I mean, I had so much respect for this guy. I bought his books. I mean, literally, I threw him in the trash can after that. And I'm like, I'm never plugging this guy on my channel again. Threw the books in the trash can, unfollowed him on social media, and I even let him know. I'm like, dude, I'm unfollowing you. I didn't say anything mean or anything. I just said, hey, I'm unfollowing you. I'm not a fan of your reactions or something. Then he was like, okay, bye, snowflake. I'm like, you calling me the snowflake, dude? Look at your reactions here. I unfollowed the guy, threw those books in the trash, stopped recommending him. But you guys who've read his books, yeah, I advise you to do the same, because the guy does not live what he teaches. He wrote a whole book on like how the ego is your worst enemy, and then he, like, all over his social media, that's all he does is protect his own ego. That's all he does is attack anybody who disagrees with him. And I'm like, dude, how could you write a book on this stuff when you don't follow a single principle in it? So I'm a huge advocate of only learning from guys who live what they teach. I don't want to learn how to build a business from somebody who's never built a business, or somebody who's not actively building businesses anymore. Huge hypocrisy there, let me say that, right? Like, I can't stand guys that do that, because they always end up becoming, or they always tend to be very extremely hypocritical. Like, everything they write is not what they live. They don't practice what they preach. And I can't stand that. It's like a huge pet peeve of mine. And I refuse to buy any books written by authors like that. Even if they're good, I just won't read them again, and I'll just throw them in the trash. They're not real, they're not authentic, they're fake, they're phonies. This guy was clearly a phony. This guy is a fake. So, see ya. Again, the best education you're ever gonna get is always gonna be through yourself. I'm a huge advocate of self-educating. Buying the books and reading the books that you want to, on topics that you want to learn about and you want to become the best in the world at. You don't need to waste your time dropping $50,000 per semester college tuition at some university that is going to be, shoving textbooks in your face that are outdated with principles that don't even work in the real world. Okay, all of these professors that teach at these colleges, none of them practice what they preach. They're exactly what I'm talking about. They're no different than this guy. They're phonies just like he is. They're fakes, because they're hiding in a classroom. They're not practicing what they preach. If you want to learn from somebody who's actually doing what you want to do, then you want to find a mentor, okay? And that's what I've stressed over and over on my YouTube channel, is that you want to find a mentor. Fire your teachers and hire mentors instead. Because all these other guys who don't practice what they preach, who don't live what they teach, they're just phonies, they're fakes, they're teachers, right? Nothing against teachers who are like teaching like arithmetic or English or social science or whatever science, biology and stuff like that. High school, middle school, elementary, fine. My mother was a middle school teacher for like 3 decades, so nothing against that. I'm talking about like once we become adults, like universities and colleges, you should not be learning from these professors. They're huge hypocrites. They are not doing what they teach. And I've always mentioned on my own, like my dating channel, the second that I stopped doing pickup, the day that I retire from game and pickup, and I'm like, hey, I'm not doing cold approach anymore, that's the day I stopped teaching. I'm like, I am not gonna continue teaching if I'm no longer out there doing game or pickup. I will stop teaching dating advice, right? I will leave my coaching videos up, but I'm gonna stop actively teaching because you're no longer gonna be getting these lessons fresh anymore. And then, you know, I'm gonna be no different than these phonies, these fakes, these teachers out there, these college professors or idiots who write books on stoicism that are anything but stoic. So, I love learning, I just don't like school, as you might not, right? You might not like school either. At the end of the day, the best education you could ever give yourself, the most valuable type of education you can ever give yourself is self-education, right? You're 1,000 times better off sitting at your local Barnes and Nobles and reading books all day on whatever topic you're interested in learning about versus going to a college or university and dropping 50 grand per semester. That's basically the average right now, 50 grand per semester to not self-educate, but to get institutionalized learning, right? Institutionalized learning, where you're basically going to be indoctrinated by a lot of these Marxist leftist tactics, right? And you're not going to be helping yourself. So that, in my opinion, is the worst type of education you could possibly get. So that's all I have to say for today's coaching video. Until next time, it's Matt Cross from AlphaMaleSecrets, and don't forget to smash that like button below. Also hit that notification bell right next to it if you want to be notified of future coaching videos of mine. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Very, very important you guys subscribe, so please subscribe to my channel. And for you guys who want to support my work and all of this red pill, gold pill, and platinum pill content even further, the best way to do that is by becoming a premium subscriber of my premium AlphaMaleSecrets channel, which I am hosting on a private platform away from YouTube. And the reason why I'm doing that is to protect my premium content from YouTube, right? So if you want to become a premium subscriber of my premium AlphaMaleSecrets channel, all you need to do is click that link below in my description box. It will take you over to my website where you can get signed up right now. It just takes 2 seconds, and it's only $1 for the entire first month of premium content from me, premium AlphaMale content from me. It's only $1, so click that link below in my description box, head over to my website and get signed up right now. It only takes 2 seconds, and I will see you in my next coaching video.